Hello and welcome. I'm Amritan Shira and you're watching Law of the Land on Raj Sabha TV. Today we bring to you the Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition Amendment Bill, which seeks to include electronic medium within the ambit of the law. To discuss the issue, I have with me Madhvi Devan, advocate, Dr. Charul Wali Khanna, member, National Commission for Women, Kanika Seth, advocate and cyber law expert. Now for the headlines. The bill includes electronic media and electronic publishing activity within the Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition law. It expands definition to specify depiction of women as a sexual object. And it empowers an inspector to conduct search and seize operation beside authorized officers of the state. The Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition Amendment Bill seeks to include information generated in electronic form within the ambit of the law prohibiting indecent representation of women. As of now, the existing law regulates primarily the print media in such matters. The government also proposes to enhance the penal provision to effectively deter indecent representation of women.
The technological advancement has resulted in development of new forms of communication like internet, satellite-based communication, multimedia messaging and cable television. Most of these mediums are unregulated in matters relating to indecent representation of women. Now the government proposes to prohibit indecent representation of women by including electronic media and electronic publishing. The government seeks to amend the existing Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition law to widen the scope of the law.
The ISP who are giving you the highway for accessing that content should not be held responsible for these content, because these contents are coming either from the overseas server, foreign, or some server into the India, which we can take into the task by blocking those content if it is available into the India. But if it is available into the foreign server, then it becomes a very challenge, because these social media websites owner are not cooperating with the security agency in a way in which our security agency is demanding.
The proposed law seeks to enhance the penalty in order to act as an effective deterrent. The bill seeks to increase the penalties from the existing maximum imprisonment of 2 years to 3 years. The bill also increases the minimum imprisonment for second offence from existing 6 months to 2 years and maximum imprisonment from existing 5 years to 7 years. The bill proposes to increase the fine from the existing 2,000 rupees to a minimum fine of 50,000 rupees, which may be increased to 1 lakh rupees for the first offence, and the minimum fine from the existing 10,000 rupees to 1 lakh rupees, and maximum fine from existing 1 lakh rupees to 5 lakh rupees for the second offence.
It is a very small act. It just pays lip service to the the whole problem. There is no clear addressal of the problem and no definition as to how the things should be managed and who should file the complaint. There is only one section about the seizure of the material which is supposed to be derogatory to women. But for me, it is just something that the government wanted to do, and it is being done. It should have more teeth, definitely.
The bill prohibits the publication or distribution of any material which contains indecent representation of women, but the provisions do not apply to any material which may be published in the interest of science, literature, art, or for bona fide religious purpose and for sculptures in the Asian monuments or temples.
Beware all those who indulge in forwarding pornographic MMS or emails, because this bill includes stricter penalties for them. With camera person Suresh, Aruna Thakur, Rajya Sabha TV.
Is there a monitoring mechanism available to identify such violations? Ma'am, first of all, the basic issue, policing the virtual highway. Do you see it happening? And we've shown you pictures of advertisements which, objectify women. The attempt is that. Do you think by expanding these definitions, by including electronic media into it, all this people, I mean, one will be able to manage to contain or stop by.
Well, it certainly becomes much harder, I think, to contain the virtual world and the rest of it. But just coming back to the fundamentals of the problem, when this is an act which seeks to prohibit indecent representation of women, I think we want to look at this in two ways. One is, look, we already have the IPC under which, say, obscenity is outlawed. And now from 86, we've had this act which seeks to outlaw indecent. The word used is indecent, not obscene, number one. And two, there is a specific, this is a gender-specific act which deals with women, okay? So obviously, for some reason at that stage, the legislature thought that the IPC is not adequate. Right. Now, what this bill, of course, does is to merely extend it to the virtual world and to all other forms of media that are available. But when we look at the definition of indecent representation of women, what I find fascinating is that it confines itself to the physical form of a woman, the depiction of her bodily form, as opposed to her social status. When we talk of indecency, indecency is a much wider term than obscenity. Obscenity is something which is, lewd, filthy, repulsive. Indecency is larger than that. And I haven't come across a single legislative provision anywhere, with the exception of the Cable Act, where the status of women is sought to be, the social status of women, because particularly in the aftermath of, the gruesome rape incident last month, and all these comments being made by your political leaders, religious leaders about, dented and painted women, whatever that means, or, your statement about how you should beg
dress
your, yes, etc.
Conduct yourself.
So, what is there to prevent that? And I think that may be far more damaging to the status of women than the clips you've just shown. Yeah. Those kind of remarks, that kind of perception about women in society. And there's only one provision which I have come across in the Cable Act under the Advertising Code, which talks about, that women shouldn't be shown in a submissive or a passive or a secondary role. Okay, so I'm wondering whether, since they have amended, or they're seeking to amend the definition of what amounts to indecent represent, what is there to outlaw hate speech against women of the kind that we've seen from our leaders in the last week? Yeah.
Ma'am, getting in, what was said, that it's basically lip service by including other mediums and bringing it into the ambit of this law. But the main problem, what Madhavi was talking about, is yet to be addressed. Do you see it the same way?
I don't totally agree. Firstly, it's not lip service. This is an amendment to the existing act. So the existing act is about indecent representation of women, in which has been defined regarding the physical form. So this is an extension to that. This is not a new act. We're not talking about a new bill. We're talking about an amendment to an existing bill. And it is an initiative of NCW, because on 2 points. Number one, we were seeing there were new forms of communication and technology with this whole technology boom, as you've shown in the film. So we thought that the scope of this act should include other forms of communication like cable television, network, internet. So that was one, and that is what is being done. I think our expert will explain to you. And the second was that we felt that the penalty is absolutely paltry, 2 years and 2,000 rupees.
Till that point, it's all fine, ma'am. But the moment you get into the definition aspect of indecency and what she was saying,
absolutely, physical form,
and preventing or deterring objectification of women.
Absolutely.
If that is the attempt, then don't you think the definition should have been much more specific?
Let us be very, very clear that the objective of this act, at no point does it say it's about commodification of women or it's a ban, a prohibition on indecent representation of women, which is normally done through the physical form. So we have other acts. But this was a very specific act in 1986 because of you see, if you will see section 3 and 4, they are talking about advertisements and publication.
Right.
So no person shall publish XYZ advertisement or cause it to be published or to be exhibited or pamphlets to be displayed. So the word publishing, when they're relating it to advertisements or any book, normally it's for the print media. I mean, since 86 it was meant to the print media. So now with the expansion of the word publishing, publishing also includes broadcasting, cable network, etc. So this is very specific act. It's not intending, nor does it claim to cover all forms of violence against women or all objects.
No, I get it.
This is specifically on her, a manner of a figure of woman, her form or body thereof, which will deprave, corrupt, or which is again. But one more thing I want to ask. I want to tell you is that I think one of your advocates had said something very specific, that there is no section that who shall make the complaint. And in our recommendations, we had made an amendment to in section 4, and we had said that a subclause A and B, in which it should be said that any member of the public or a well-meaning person, or that definitely, if it was defined, it
should have been included. Ma'am, I'll bring in you. Policing the virtual highway, the line and the point that was being made by the president of the association. You think that's a genuine issue, or it can still be monitored, and especially armed with the search and seizure power of an inspector?
Yes, I feel that the amendments which have been suggested in this bill will certainly give more effectiveness to the enforcement. When it comes to offences, what is an offence? First of all, it has widened the ambit of what is indecent representation of women. So far, it was not so clear that whether these other forms of media will also be included, because it was only curtailing it to print media.
Right.
Now it includes electronic media, it will include social media, it will also include other forms of broadcast like cable TV or any kinds of, even for that matter of fact, advertisements through any medium, whether it's radio or it's even electronic. So that is one thing which is a very good
but
thing.
The point made out by him was what happens to the foreign servers?
Yes.
The foreign servers are full of such equipment, and you've got a liberal society
Internet
outside.
certainly is a vast area where you can't possibly curtail it to a physical territory. So we do understand that the medium is such that you cannot control or regulate content which is coming from outside, only to the extent you will be able to do that so that you don't have public access within India. So blocking occurs. For instance, when there is a problem, like there is an ad which is indecent to women and it's aired and you can actually access it within India, all you can do is block it. And blocking will occur only when there is a complaint. So there is so much of influx of information on the internet and advertisements and other kinds of platforms. So it's very difficult for the intermediary, the ISP, to regulate it unless he learns of it. He has to have either actual knowledge of it, or he has to be conspiring in it, or if he's not aware, then at least when he's made aware, remove it.
Which essentially means it is doable.
It is doable.
It is doable.
No doubt. We have a section in the IT Act, which is section 79, whereby if there is an actual notice given to the ISP, he is supposed to remove it within 36 hours. That is according to the ISP guidelines, which is framed under section 79.
So in 36 hours, he gets 2 crore strikes, it's fine.
Well, the moment he gets a complaint, he has to start making initiatives to block it.
Block it. Okay. Time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will talk about the attempt of the government to prevent objectification of women. Welcome back. The proposed law seeks to expand the definition of indecent representation of women to include depiction of women as a sexual object and seeks to prevent objectification of women. It seeks to empower a police officer of the rank of an inspector to carry out search and seizure operations in addition to the existing provisions of the government's authorized officers.
The proposed amendment seeks to empower police officer of inspector and above rank to conduct search and seizure. They will be given powers to enter any premises and conduct search and seizure of any material if there is reason to believe that the offence under the law has been committed. At present, only officers authorized by the state government can conduct search and seizure operations. According to the government, this additional change will ensure better enforcement of the proposed law.
But if the act itself, lays down guidelines, or even the rules, if you see, are very slipshod. If the rules lay down guidelines as to what can be done, what need not be done, or mainly what need not be done. So definitely the publishing houses, the audiovisual area, content makers, etc., will have to be restrained.
The bill expands the definition of indecent representation of women to include depiction of women as a sexual object, which appeals to the prurient interest. The new definition seeks to make the intent of the portrayal more specific. The existing law defines indecent portrayal as a depiction of the figure, form, body, or any part of a woman which denigrates women or is likely to injure public morality. According to the government, the change will be help in addressing the problem of increased objectification of women. The bill also quotes the National Crime Records Bureau data, which registers a gradual increase in the number of violations of existing law. In 2009, the total numbers of violations were 845. It increased to 895 in 2010, and in 2011, 453 violations were recorded.
एक औरत को ही आप प्लेटर पे रख के क्यों परोस रहे हैं, क्यों सर्व करना चाहते हैं उसको. और फिर एक बात और भी है कि डीओ का ऐड है, सपोज फॉर एग्जांपल मैं कहूँगी डीओ का ऐड है, अब आप उसमें बिकनी में औरत को दिखा रहे हैं, तो आखिर हम कहाँ ले जाना चाहते हैं. कंसर्निंग जो है कि अगर आपको शूज़ का ऐड है तो कम से कम औरत को दौड़ती हुई दिखाइए ट्रैक सूट में, या वो तो बात समझ में आती है, लेकिन शूज़ के ऐड में आप लड़की को बिकनी में दिखा रहे हैं, तो ये सब मैं समझती हूँ कि बहुत गलत है.
Some of the other laws which supplements indecent representation of women include present registration of book law, the information technological law, the Indian Penal Code, and cable television networks regulation law. The Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition Law was enacted in 1986 to prohibit indecent representation of women through advertisements or in publication, writings, paintings, figures, or any other manner. However, the law in its present form relates primarily to the print media.
The Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition Bill is the first updation to the Principal Act by including electronic media under its umbrella. With camera person Suresh, Aruna Thakur, Rajya Sabha TV.
Now suddenly you have, a huge number of police officers who will be empowered if the bill is passed and approved by the parliament to go search and seize if a complaint rises. My first question to you, ma'am, is you've heard a lot of point of views in this.
Yes.
On the definition part, very specific, very clear. Sexual object, anything that depicts a woman as a sexual object.
Yes, I completely object to this definition. I mean, women is not supposed to be even looked at as a sexual object, leave alone the usage of the words in the amendment. I don't think that it was appropriate to use the word as a sexual object.
They are prohibiting such activity.
That's true.
Which depicts a woman
Yes.
as a sexual object or appeals to the prurient interest.
True.
You know, and very, very clear objectification of women. So very specific categorizations.
Yes.
If the government is seeking to prohibit that, then do you see a problem here?
Well, I feel that women obviously cannot be treated like a sexual object, and if the government wants to prohibit that, that's a very good step, indeed. However, maybe words could have been better used instead of saying women as a sexual object. Anything which is denigrating, like what is already mentioned here, that anything which is denigrating or derogatory to the women as a status of women and to her reputation, to her mental or other faculties also, I would say, not just physical form, is something that should have been covered by indecency, indecent representation in the physical form, as well as anything to do with denigrating her status, her reputation. I agree on this issue. However, she is not to be treated like a sexual object.
You mean the definition and the way it has been written is what you're objecting to?
Yes.
But the purpose is fine, is
Purpose
acceptable.
is fine, is acceptable. There are people in the world who would, or say, treat women in this manner, and therefore it is something has to be written to prohibit that, the activity. I understand the
Valika,
purpose is fine.
You would like to...
The
same issue, the way it has been...
I kind of agree with what she is saying, because, I feel that when you use a negative word, you're kind of perpetuating that thought. So I'm also a little disturbed about this, because, we are talking about objectification of women and commodification of women, but to say it in an act, I mean, it's a little, you should say it should be indecent, but at the same time they are saying such which is likely to deprave or arouse the prurient, interest of, so that is actually what they want to say.
Ma'am, if the law is not specific,
no,
how do you expect it to be more effective?
The law is, in fact, it was kind of, they said deprave, corrupt, injure public morality, and derogatory, indecent, denigratory. These were the words used prior to the present proposed amendment, but now it's become more general. So that I'm sure in the rules they'll specify exactly what they mean, because undoubtedly there is, you see what the intention, I mean, you must understand the intention behind this. There is, unfortunately, I mean, whether we want to accept it or not, sex sells. So we cannot bring out everybody's prurient interest. We can't bring out your base instincts. We can't arouse them all the time. Otherwise, we'll have more violence against women.
The proposed amendment does that?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It wants to stop that, quash that. But the word that it's used is definitely, I mean...
is derogatory itself, I will say.
Okay. Ma'am, on the 3 points, the sexual object, appeals to prurient interest, prevents objectification of women. The way it has been written, but the purpose is fine. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think the intentions may be noble, but how do you prevent, commodification? For example, I mean, you see so many ads with men in bare torsos. You see a Salman Khan with a bare torso all the time. Is that not objectification of men? And I'm sure that there are women audiences who love to see that. So where do you draw the line? This is very, very difficult. Very difficult. So, I think, we have to...
But does specificity help?
Well, what I'm trying to say is that in the case of
better implementation of
morality, laws on morality defy definition. It will, vary. Like Lady Chatterley's lover was outlawed in India, but it passed muster in the United Kingdom. Now, today, if you test it, 50 years later, maybe it will pass the muster. So it varies with time. It varies with, and there are so many changes taking place in the world. So,
yes, ma'am.
I just want to add to what Madhvi is saying, and definitely, there you can, public morality and morals, what is the concept, is especially in India, it's very region specific, culture specific, education specific, so that has been deleted. Knowing the legislatures, knowing that this is, public morality is a kind of a grey area, and it's very, maybe the police inspector has some other morals, or, and somebody else doesn't. So that has been deleted. So now it's become more specific. The concept of public morality and morals, injuring public morality and morals has been deleted.
That the Supreme Court has already
offended by somebody who's wearing a skirt. It may be a perfectly decent knee-length skirt, but somebody from a village somewhere in the boondocks may feel that this is just most improper and immoral.
If you take too many parameters into account, and if you really take the entire diversity into account, do you think it will be possible for one to be specific in providing a legal structure which runs across the length and breadth of India?
I think
my question.
I'll just go with
let me give you one concrete example of how, for example, the law says that nudity is not always obscenity.
That's true.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Now let me give you this example of the film Bandit Queen, where the members of the Gujjar community had challenged the showing of this film on the ground that one of the scenes of frontal nudity of Phulan Devi was completely a slur on Indian womanhood. And the scene was basically that she had been gang raped there for days on end, and then she was paraded before the village completely naked and asked to draw water. So it was a really heart-wrenching, a very, very disturbing scene, no doubt. And anyone with a little bit of sensitivity would have been very, very disturbed by this. And yet there were those in the cinema hall who hooted and clapped and cheered.
Yeah.
And at the same, now are you going to censor something like that? Now, what the court said, that eventually this is to, arouse your revulsion against what is being done. But there are those who will enjoy it and feel titillated by something as tragic as that. So, I mean, can you cater to every segment of
That's
society?
the question, ma'am. Is it possible to
it's
specify,
very,
codify,
very
provide a legal
why,
structure?
No, that's why in the
Legal
Ajay
structure.
Goswami case, if you remember, the Supreme Court has very clearly said now we follow the Hicklin test, now the Miller test, not the Hicklin test, which was earlier.
Outdated,
So it's the objective standard which has to be viewed. How objectively one can view it. If you take it subjectively, everybody has a different view. You have to have an objective test.
Time for us to head into a break. My colleague Aruna Thakur spoke to Indu Malhotra, senior advocate, and tried to get her point of view.
First question I want to ask you, that this bill seeks to include the electronic media. So do you think that including electronic media gives more strength to the act?
Well, now this is an act of 1986 and a lot of communication modes have developed with the advent of technology. There is multimedia, networking, cable, internet, etc. So for all these reasons, since there is so much communication by various other modes, it was considered imperative to bring about the electronic form also, and that is why this bill has been moved in November 2012 to bring in the electronic form also. This act is in addition to and not in derogation of other laws. So even though the other laws are there, this is an additional remedy. There is an additional remedy for women. Obscenity is already there under section 292 of the Indian Penal Code, but there is an additional remedy and it's far more wide now.
The bill also seeks to enhance the penalty. So what will be your reaction on this?
My view is that it's certainly an improvement on the original act of 1986. It makes it far wider, and so it's certainly a step forward.
Do you have any suggestion for the existing bill?
What my feeling is that the exception to it is with respect to public good. You can justify a depiction if it is in public good on the basis of art, science, culture. So there are various exceptions which are very vague and widely worded, and that is where exploitation can take place. That people can pass it off and say it's in public good. Now what is in public good? What is an expression of freedom of speech and expression under 19(1)(a)? It's completely vague. That is the problem with the amendment, because the exception is too wide.
Thank you, ma'am, for joining us on this discussion. It's time for us to end the show. You can email your suggestions and comments to law.rstv@gmail.com. You can also watch our shows on the YouTube. We'll be back with a new issue and a new episode. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV.